Welcome to Y Nada Más, a Real Madrid podcast.
All right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Y Nada Más podcast. I am your host, Eric Rivera, and it is good to be back. I am sorry, ladies and gentlemen, that I have been gone for so long, but life gets in the way, and then I've been lazy as fuck. Really just not, there's been so much going on. There is so much going on right now in the world of all things Real Madrid, for real, right? It's crazy. So the last time I spoke to you guys, and I'm not going to get into all this and rehash everything that you guys have already known. So the last time I spoke with you guys was, I believe, right before Atletico Madrid, right before the Madrid derby. So much stuff has happened. There was the whole racism thing, the whole Vini Baila Vini Jr. or whatever it was, Baila Vini Baila. There was all this stuff. It's been a whole kind of drama-filled time for Real Madrid, I think, and things outside of the pitch. But I think it's because things have been going on so well inside of the pitch that what I believe is that the Spanish media, what they love to do in Spain, and I have this off very good sources, the Spanish media just tends to love to bring up drama. Drama. That's the thing. That's what sells. We all know that's what sells. And it's not only the Spanish media. The English media does the same thing. I think the U.S. media does the same thing. Obviously, it doesn't do it for football or soccer, but it doesn't do it for every other sport and in politics and all sorts of nonsense. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. And honestly, in my opinion, I don't know. It bothers me that so many people just my sum up of that whole thing is that, the whole thing with Vinicius, I think, is really just stupid because I don't understand why people get bent out of shape over somebody playing the game the way they want to play it. I understand if he's provoking and stuff like that, but I don't think just being really good at balling, being really good at playing the game, and doing a little bit of showmanship, which is what the Brazilians have always been known for, is a bad thing. And then, of course, there's that whole thing with Atletico. And honestly, I think out of all the teams I've disliked for many years, obviously Barcelona is always at the top of the list, but it's from a competitive rivalry. Also, the fact that they bring politics into it. I'm sure Madrid does too, but I feel like Florentino is a little bit more level-headed and doesn't always try to delve into those type of things. But the Atletico Madrid thing with they've done a bunch of stuff that I think is just really stupid, which is they don't want to do the pasillo, like when, basically they don't want to do the what do you call it? The walk of honor, essentially, to salute the champions. They don't want to do that when it comes to Madrid. They're always complaining essentially about, they still have their ultras. There is a lot of very, very evident, there's a lot of evidence, of course, of just blatant racism from their fan base. Obviously, not all. There's a lot of bad eggs, I'm sure, but it's just there's no movement from the club to denounce it. So a lot of things there that have made me really, really, really dislike Atletico Madrid this season. So much so, I don't know if they've overtaken Barcelona, but I think Barcelona is just from a sporting perspective. They've done things that, they talk such a good game, and essentially they're always talking nonsense, with Xavi and the Xavineta and everything. And they were doing pretty good there for a while. But I felt like, I don't know if it was just me, but I'm pretty sure a lot of you agreed to, nothing was really impressing me about this Barcelona team. They were winning games, essentially. They were doing everything that they needed to do, but they were doing it against teams. They were doing it against the Elches of the world, the Granadas, not Granada this season, but Elche. They've done it, Osasuna, different smaller teams that are not doing as well, obviously, in La Liga. I don't even know if Osasuna is in there because Osasuna is kind of in mid-table right now. But anyway, playing against the lower level teams, struggling sometimes against them. And essentially that was what we were seeing a lot of. And then when they faced the big dogs, when they faced the Bayern, when they faced Inter, now into the second time, they were always, down a little bit. They were always failing just a little bit even. And then I think the one that got everybody a little bit worried on the Barcelona side from Barcelona friends that I spoke to was definitely the performance against Celta Vigo in the second half was something that really got everybody very, very worried about Barcelona, right? So Barcelona as in worried about that they weren't really going to live up to the expectations of everything that they had purchased. All of the, games, all of these people all of these palancas, these financial levers that they pulled essentially to get all of these players, and they weren't going to live up to expectations. Now, obviously, some of it is luck because of the fact that they've had so many injuries with the likes of Ronald Araujo and Koundé and all this kind of stuff. But also it just comes down to, and I think I've said this with Mbappe, and I think I said this with Mbappe and the whole PSG saga. Money doesn't buy greatness, and then, you can throw a lot of money at a situation, but you still see it happening. Manchester City, with all the money that they've thrown at the whole situation, everything Pep has tried to buy essentially a team worthy of winning the Champions League. And yeah, in talent paper, they have it, but they haven't been able to do it. PSG, the same thing. You look at that team on paper and they should absolutely be dominating everybody, and they haven't been able to do it. And it's I always talk about those intangibles, those extracurriculars, those things that are outside of what we know is just the meat and potatoes of football, essentially, outside of the stats, outside of the goals, and outside of the amount of passes and possession and all of those little stats. There is those intangibles, those things that can't be measured, which is essentially a chemistry, which is essentially form, which is essentially in Spain what they call casta, or what Mourinho referred to as football heritage, all of these things that money can't buy. And it was the same, and that's something that Barcelona is falling into as well, trying to throw money at the problem and trying to resuscitate a style of play that is the tiki-taka and essentially that golden era of Barcelona that they had under Guardiola, when they don't have the players to do that anymore. They don't have Iniesta. Xavi's now the guy running the show. He's not the guy outside on the field. As good as he was outside of, when he was a player, he's not demonstrating it as a coach. You brought in a Lewandowski, but how is Lewandowski going to score, a bunch of goals if the service isn't coming in? You have a Dembele, who's, I think, one of the best players on the team for sure, but he's still he's still erratic. He makes bad decisions in the final third. You have a Rafinha that isn't living up to expectations, which I think the expectations were already really big to begin with. So anyway, there's so much stuff going on with all the teams around us, and the team that just really seems to be calm, cool, and collected through all of this is Real Madrid. And it has been an absolutely spectacular season so far from Real Madrid, and it seems like they haven't even kicked things into gear yet. And that's the amazing thing about all this. It seems that they haven't even gotten to the point where they are really showcasing the beautiful football that they are capable of at times that we've seen. It's almost like they're not kicking it into gear, almost by I would say by, how would you say, by design, because essentially that is the way, in a lot of ways, that Ancelotti approaches the game. He may not be the most exciting coach. He plays attacking football when he needs to, then he sits back. And much to a lot of I feel like, a lot of you guys that talk on the internet and talk on Twitter all the time that I run across on Twitter all the time is, definitely one of the things is you can see, I think that you guys all agree with, I'm sure, is it's a Real Madrid that scores and then kind of sits back and relaxes. And yes, it frustrates us to all end because of the fact that they sit and they concede. They sit and they concede, and then they'll just go and score more again. And it's like, how many times are we going to play that game? It's basically, making us as fans always consistently worried about, are we going to win this game, or is it going to be, are we going to be, pulling victory from the jaws of defeat into the last minutes of the game, right? So, but it seems like Real Madrid right now, for all intents and purposes, is doing what they need to do and winning. And they're winning the games that they need to win. And they're winning against, right now already, we've already played the top teams in La Liga with exception of maybe Athletic Bilbao, that is performing pretty solid this season. But we've already beaten Atletico. We've already beaten Barcelona. This is after the Clásico that I'm recording this. We've already beaten Barcelona. We've already beaten Atletico. And we've already beaten a Betis that has been probably for me. And I like Betis. So probably the other team that I've been liking more and more these last few years outside of Real Madrid. Betis has been performing really well, and we beat them too. So the top performing teams in La Liga are the teams that we've beaten, and essentially, of course, we dropped points against an Osasuna, which I think Osasuna has kind of always given us a little bit of a headache. They're a difficult team to play at times. But you know what? They're performing pretty well this season. That was a horrible game that we played against Osasuna. But then we're performing everywhere else that counts. So if we don't continue to drop points, and we actually, we won the game and we got the points over the team that we needed to get points over, which was Barcelona. So if we don't drop any other points and they continue in this sort of weird, I wouldn't say they're in a downfall, but they're sort of spiraling around where I'm thinking that they're not too confident in their own style of football right now. And especially if what happens, which I think everyone thinks is going to happen unless Inter really shits the bed and loses against Victoria Pilsen at home, they're going to be playing the Europa League again. And what are we going to wonder is, you could say that they're going to focus 100% on La Liga, but they need the money. So I think they're going to focus, on Europa League too. And there's not easy teams in Europa League right now either. You have, Manchester United, not saying that they're doing really well, but you have Manchester United. I think you have, Arsenal's there, which is performing incredibly in the Premier League. They're leading the Premier League right now, and they're in the Europa League. So I think it's really going to be interesting to see what's going to happen to Barcelona when they start facing these other teams, in the Europa League, and they might end up getting kicked out by a team like they did last season. They ended up getting kicked out by an Eintracht Frankfurt, So no disrespect to Eintracht Frankfurt, who's like another team that I've just loved, and I think mostly because of their social media game. But I'm rambling on. There's so much stuff to talk about because I've been gone, and you know what, guys? I feel like really this is a year that I really, and I've been telling you guys this, and I've been telling my team this, and this is a year we really want to expand. And I really want to get better at this. I want to be more consistent, but it's difficult because, like I said, I have my day job, but I want to be consistent. My goal, and shout out to the guys at Managing Madrid, and I think that Let's Be Real podcast as well. Those guys are pretty consistent, but one of the things I want to be is maybe, Managing Madrid touts itself as being the number one, English speaking podcast when it comes to Real Madrid. I would like to be the second or up there, kind of tied with number one, because essentially I think when it comes to Real Madrid content in English, there isn't a lot of it, and there are tons of you all over the world, wherever you're listening, right? Whether you guys are in the Middle East, whether you guys are in South Asia, whether you're in Pakistan or India, whether you're in Africa, whether you're in the Middle East where you listen to me, whether you're in the U.S., in England, in Europe, wherever you're listening to me from, which I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and we thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Essentially what I want to do is continue to grow this podcast. I want to continue not only to grow the podcast, but I also want to grow the quality of it. And one of the things is I'm hitting a lot of, problems sometimes with the equipment, essentially, because, I upgraded the cameras and stuff, but the computer doesn't seem to always agree with me. So, when I throw stuff to my editor, sometimes it's in bits and pieces. Anyway, but that's my promise. I definitely want to get better. And then one of the things that I heard was, but one of the comments that somebody left us on Apple Podcasts was that you guys wanted to see more insiders, essentially, maybe from Real Madrid, that would tell you guys things that are happening maybe in the dressing room, that are happening, and I would love that too. The problem is a lot of them are Spanish speaking, and there's not one of the things I wonder is why is there not as much outreach by Real Madrid, essentially, and why La Liga, and by La Liga as a whole, really, to really cater to a U.S. fan base that's English speaking. Probably because we have a lot of Hispanics in the United States. It's very easy to cater to the Hispanic market of the United States without having to worry about the English speaking market. And the Premier League, of course, is catering to the English-speaking market because they have a language in common. But, I think you can really say that there are two main languages in the United States, essentially, if there are, but it's Spanish and English. And so, I really want Real Madrid, people that are interested in the Premier League or interested in football, should be interested, if you're English speaking, in one of the best teams, if not the best team in the world. When it comes to football, at least the winningest team, and Americans always appreciate, the big dogs, so, the dynasty types of teams. So that's my goal, is to really just bring you more Real Madrid content. So I do want to bring some more insiders. I have a good friend who essentially is doing a lot of stuff now with Real Madrid. He actually lives in Spain, so I'm going to try to he's in Spain now. He was living here in the States. Now he's back in Spain, so he's going to be able to bring me some more interesting content. I want to bring him on the podcast. He's helped me in the past with some things behind the scenes and also been on the show. And then in addition, I have, shout out to guys like Trambach. You guys have seen him posting. He posted a lot of different things as well on the on Twitter. He's covering, I think he covers Manchester United. I think he's also covering Inter Milan. And then he covers, of course, Madrid, which is his bread and butter. Essentially, he covers it for me, and he's basically our main writer. So Trambach, thank you for helping out. So he's going to be on the podcast when I can bring him on. Halal, who's also been a great addition to the podcast as well. And my goal is to continue bringing on more people. So listen, guys, if you want to help me out and help us out here, because really it's just my editor, my graphic designer, and myself. If you guys want to help us out, go hit us up at info@inadamas.net. That's my goal, is to really continue churning out content as much as I can, possibly in between my regular day job and without losing my day job, But with that said, guys, today is a day of celebration because today I am recording this at 10 o'clock p.m. on Monday, October 17th. And it is because Karim Benzema won the Ballon D'Or. He won the Ballon d'Oro, or Ballon d'Or, however you want to say it. The golden ball. It was a laughable. Here's my thing about this whole thing, and I think this is where I want to touch. So we already talked about El Clásico. We talked about, obviously, the things that were happening with Atletico Madrid. I think Real Madrid, is already doing well in the Champions League. They're not really facing, I would say, big name teams. Rudiger doing some incredible things at the end there of the game against Shakhtar to tie the game, breaking his face. The commitment that this team is showing. Valverde exploding onto the scene, scoring some bangers, and just being the workhorse that he is. That's absolutely insane. Vinicius Jr., of course, continuing to be a threat down that left flank. Rodrigo showing up when he needs to show up. And Benzema, who's been off and on, but it's because, and people like to criticize him, Madridistas, I don't understand why. This is a man who throughout this entire time that he's been with Madrid, has been booed, has been whistled, has been asked to leave, has been, people have doubted him. People have wanted him gone, and essentially he stuck around. He gave us an incredible, absolutely barn burner of a season last season, so much that it earned him probably one of the most unanimous victories in a Ballon d'Or that we've ever seen, essentially. That is absolutely, everybody knew that this guy was going to win, was going to get the Ballon d'Or. Anybody that would tell you different, there was going to be doubts. And I think the only reason people were doubting that there was going to be that he was going to win the Ballon d'Or is because France football and in all their mania or whatever it is that's going through their weird thick skulls is doing these weird things like the club of the year and then the Copa trophy for Gavi. And listen, I am biased against Barcelona 100%. I will admit I'm biased against Barcelona. I do not like the team. I do not like them. I do not want them to win ever. The only two games I will watch on the weekend if I don't have time is to make sure that I watch Real Madrid and I make sure I watch Barcelona and hope they lose every single game that they play. So maybe you could say they live rent free in my head, but at the same time, it's because I live and breathe their losses, And I think any Madridista will tell you that they do the same. It's the one team we just want always to lose. And that's what the rivalry is. But to me, honestly, I will admit that Pedri is a talent. I will admit, to me, honestly, I do think that Frankie de Jong is talented. I just don't think he's finding the skill, the luster, the shine that he had at Ajax is not showing as much. But I do think he's a talented guy. Obviously, Lewandowski is a killer. I think Dembele is a quality player. I just think he needs to he needs to fix a lot of parts of his game. But Gavi, this whole thing around Gavi just blows my mind. This, and a lot of people like to talk about PR. The public relations around this team is just insane to me. How is it that a team that won absolutely nothing last season, Lewandowski, give Lewandowski the striker award. I don't care, because obviously, Lewandowski is Lewandowski. He's a goal scorer. And essentially, the award wasn't for what he did with Barcelona. The award is for what he did last season when he was still at Bayern and he broke Gerd Muller's record. So that is the reason that he won that award. And maybe it's just to France football's way to I don't know, make Barcelona feel better for all the shit that they've been through. But I don't know why people just coddle these fucking losers, man. This team that, that's essentially hasn't won anything. And Gavi is the player that you choose over Jude Bellingham, who essentially, I think at this right now, ever since Haaland left, is the guy that really is, in a lot of ways, and no disrespect to Dortmund and the other players, the other fine players that they have there, but essentially the one that is putting Dortmund on his back and is showcasing a hell of a lot of talent. Musiala, who I think is, super. I think everybody knows about, Musiala from Bayern, but the fact that he's not even, that he didn't win. The fact that he's not considered over Gavi blows my mind, considering, how well he's done for Bayern, that this kid's been shining for a long time, that he plays for Germany as well. I don't know, what has Gavi won? It just blows my mind. It's just like, you have to give Barcelona something, because if not, they're going to get mad at you. I don't understand what it is. It really blows my mind. Camavinga, yes, I think he hasn't had a good start to this season, but last season he was absolutely integral in our run in the Champions League. And the kid, what is he, 19 years old right now? So he's just 1 year older than Gavi, essentially. And he has a Champions League under his belt. He has a Supercopa under his belt. He's been a part of this team. He has a La Liga under his belt. How are those things not taken into consideration? And there's a whole other stuff there that I want to get into about this about France football, and essentially the award, the Ballon D'Or award, or awards in general for football. The awards in general, that I think there needs to be a complete overhaul, because this whole thing with France football, it's choosing who the best player in the world is super subjective, because it's subjective if you're not going to have an actual, this is the thing. What are the requisites to win the best player in the world? Because the problem with subjectively picking one guy out of all the amazing footballers in the world, and there are many amazing footballers. The one issue with choosing choosing one person over the other, is what are the defining characteristics that you're looking for? What are the things that you need, that a player needs to, what are the boxes that a player needs to tick off in order to get nominated for that? And so we've talked a lot about it. A lot of people have talked about, obviously, okay, so in football, you score goals, right? So it's goals, then assists, right? But then if you're only thinking about goals and assists, then obviously you're leaving out some vital positions in football, like possibly defenders that are not going to, rack up assists all the time. They're not going to rack up goals like a striker will. They're not going to rack up goals like a winger would, or assists like a winger would, or assists like a cam or a midfielder would. They're not going to rack up a center defensive midfielder. He's not going to rack up goals or rack up assists all the time. Definitely a goalkeeper isn't. So this takes me back to that stupid award that they gave Lewandowski. What was it, like a year ago? I think it was last season or whatever, or the season before for 2020, I believe, where they just because they canceled 2020 and 2021, they gave him the best striker award and then gave Messi, the best, they gave him Messi the Ballon D'Or. Okay, whatever. I'm not going to talk about Messi and make this a Messi Ronaldo debate, but if you are going to count, if we're only going to count goals, right? If we're only going to count goals and assists, and and you're going to have that as essentially the only thing that is going to the only thing that is going to make you consider a player being the best, then you're already taking midfielders, midfielders that aren't attacking midfielders, and wingers that are not prolifically scoring. You're already taking them out of the equation, so you're essentially left with strikers and maybe center forwards, and maybe an attacking midfielder that play, I don't know, so you're already taking those guys out of the equation. And it's the same thing over and over. When are we going to see? So to me, it's this whole thing it's so subjective because it's really just somebody making up, because we've heard all this stuff. Well, no, it's not goals. Goals shouldn't be the determining factor, because if it's an individual award, then there's other things. There's intangibles. I mean, how he changes the game, who he scores against. I mean, because then if you want to just bring it down to just goals and assists, we can rack up numbers, and right now, you say, okay, Cristiano Ronaldo had this many goals, or Messi had this many goals, and this player had this many goals, and that's what they did, and now they're the best player because they simply reached a number. They reached a number, and that's what it is. You have this many goals, this many assists. But then you have to take into consideration other things. Does it matter where they scored the goals and assists? Does it matter who they scored them against? Does it matter when they scored them? If they scored them for their national team or their non-national team? So how do you take into account somebody like Lewandowski, who's a fantastic player when it comes to Bayern Munich and Barcelona and can rack up goals, but then he plays for Poland that doesn't always do well, because it's not a team that's been, known for being, let's say, a world power when it comes to football. So do you have to take that away? Does he get extra points for that? Does he get extra points if he scores a goal with Poland because it's harder to do so than if he was, let's say, with a Brazil or an Argentina or a Portugal? So then you get into these weird, sort of gray areas. And then it becomes super subjective, where it becomes almost like a political debate. And we see the politics, because essentially what did Gavi do that Bellingham and Musiala didn't do? Because if we look at Bellingham and Musiala's numbers, which I saw somebody posted it up on Twitter, they essentially had higher goals, more goals and more assists in less games than Gavi did. So how is he the one who wins? Is it a simply political vote because essentially you just want that person to win? And that's where my problem is. I don't care who wins at the end of the day. Obviously, I wanted Karim Benzema to win, but it's because he deserved to win, because essentially he won everything with Real Madrid. He scored, he got the Pichichi, he scored the most goals in La Liga, essentially, scored the most goals in the Champions League. He did what he needed to do to take his team to get the most trophies. Essentially, it's why it was a unanimous decision that he won the whole thing. That he won the thing. That I understand, but when it's tight, what makes the difference? And why are defenders not included? Why are goalkeepers not included? Like with Thibaut Courtois, that wins the Yassine Trophy as being the best goalkeeper in the world, but then he comes in number 7 when you're considering who the best players in the world are. How is it that Vinicius, who had such a stellar season last season, what was he, like 9th or something? So it's what is, to me, these award shows are just stupid. And then what happens is a lot of times there's no logic to them, essentially. It's really just a bunch of people at a table voting and saying, well, here's my vote. This is who I vote for. And you don't know who's bought and paid for that thing. There should be some defining things. Let's say just go by stats then. Just go by, if you want to do it cut and dry, it's who scored the most goals and who made the most assists. Right? And yeah, I think it should be taken into consideration if they play for one of the top 4 leagues. That should be taken into consideration. If they won a trophy with the team, all those things should be taken into consideration. But just make it a numbers game. And if it's a numbers game, then that's who wins. And anybody who wants to whine about it, we can see it written on a paper. This is how many goals he had. This is how many assists he had, and that's how many games he played. And so this guy's the winner. But that's why my idea with these things is make it just more cut and dry. Make it more cut and dry, black and white. Essentially, you either scored the goals or you didn't. And then, so make it a striker award like you did with Lewandowski a couple of years ago. So it can't be just one overall winner. Essentially, you make a best striker in the world award. You make a best midfielder in the world award. You make a best defender in the world award. And you make a best goalkeeper in the world award. And those 4 guys, essentially, or girls, when it comes to the women's game, they're your best players in the world because they're the best players of the world in their position. Because you can't compare. It's so crazy to me that you can have somebody like a Militao or a Sergio Ramos. I mean, Sergio Ramos, without a doubt, one of the best center backs of all time, right? You can't have. I feel like we can't go through football without calling out the greatest defenders of all time, like a Maldini, like a Cannavaro, like a Baresi, a Sergio Ramos, Virgil van Dijk, if you want to put him in there, I guess. You can't go all over the place. You can't name these guys, these defenders, and then they're never going to win an award because what you're looking at is goals and what you're looking at is assists. And then maybe for defenders, you're looking occasionally at how many tackles they made and what they did, essentially. But you don't really include them because, with strikers, the pretty stuff of football, which is goals and assists and all that kind of stuff, is what makes everybody ooh and ah. So essentially, that's who's going to win. So it's a disservice to the game to leave those guys out. I mean, obviously Luka Modric won, but there was a lot of arguments because how could you choose that Luka Modric got a Ballon d'Or if, let's say he didn't score the most goals, he didn't make the most assists, he didn't make the most tackles, but you're saying, there's an esoteric reason for it. It's because he made us feel good because he led Croatia to the World Cup final, which had never been done before. He won a Champions League. He did this and this and this. And of course, 100%, I feel he deserves it, but you can't the naysayers are always going to have something to say, and that's why I don't agree with these. Essentially what they become is popularity contests. It's kind of who the writer or whatever, if it's a sports writer or some asshole with money, essentially, that has some, power in the game of football, but really, and makes decisions in the game of football, but really has never played the game, understood the game, whatever. That's the guy. That's the guy that you wanted. That's the guy who's going to make the decision. That's the guy who's going to make the final decision. No, man, just leave it up to make there like an actual criteria for strikers, an actual criteria for midfielders, and an actual criteria for defenders. And there you go. And for goalkeepers. And those are the 4 awards, man, and leave it like that, because then there's no way you can say he or she wasn't the best, And then if you want to pull together out of all those guys, sort of make some sort of other amazing stat, like bring out some other sort of criteria that out of those 4, who's going to be named the best of the best, then, make something. I don't know. He saved puppies or something, he gave Laporta a hand job. I don't know. He did something, and that's why he's the best in the world now, But I think they're just so subjective and stupid, and then we let those things, all these Twitter trolls like to just go on there and shoot down whoever wins it's fake, it's planned, it's because Madrid pulls the strings, it's because Barcelona this, Barcelona that, it's because the Premier League, it's because this. You leave the room for error. You leave the room for speculation. You leave the room for doubt. So that's why I don't agree with it. But I do agree, of course, with all that said, let's sum that up. With all that said, I, of course, agree 100% with Karim Benzema winning it. There was nobody else. If he wouldn't win, and which is what like a lot of people were afraid of, if he wouldn't have won, it would be an absolute travesty, and they might have well just shut down France football, because that would be just ridiculous. Which, at the same time, I already feel like France football is a joke because of that Copa award. And then don't even get me started on the Club of the Season award. That is the most ridiculous award I've ever seen. When the first place was Manchester City. The second place was Liverpool. And third place was Real Madrid. That's an absolute, okay, right there and then. Let's just go back into who won what last season. So Ballon d'Or takes into consideration, I guess, the best, obviously if we're looking at the European leagues, of course, are the top leagues. So we're taking, it is, let's say, the best player in the world, but let's say it's European football, the best player in the continent, essentially, right? The continental Europe. So you have this giant tournament every year, which is called the Champions League, which essentially pits the best teams in Europe against the other best teams in Europe, right? So, or pit, I guess to say it easier, it pits the best teams in Europe against each other, right? You call it the Champions League. Why? Because everybody there is usually champions. They won the league in England. They won the league in Italy. The team that won the league in Italy, the team that won the league in Spain. You get it. I don't have to explain it to you. So you call it the Champions League, and they all play against each other, right? They all play against each other, eliminate, whatever, groups, round of 16, quarterfinals, whatever. And the team that wins at the end is the most badass team in Europe, right? That's what the Champions League is for. Now add to that whether or not they won their domestic league. So not only did they win the Champions League, they won their domestic league. Then most of all these leagues have like a domestic cup, right? Where I guess if you have if you have 2 or 3 divisions that play football, you have an A, a B, a C class essentially, or an A, B, C division. You put all of those guys in a pot and they play. And then at the end, whoever wins the cup, right? So you take into consideration that. And so then I guess you can say, all right, out of all of those teams, they got the best team in the world because, so it blows my mind that Manchester City won the league. Okay. They won the Premier League, right? Great. Liverpool didn't win the Premier League. They got second place in the Premier League. And then, all right, so right there you have Manchester City won let's look at the logic here, because Manchester City won the Premier League, but it didn't win the Champions League. So they didn't win the biggest European competition. They win the biggest European competition, but they won their league. And then what? Did they win the Community Shield or the FA Cup or whatever it is? Who won the FA Cup? I don't remember. I don't really care as much, about the FA Cup. I'm sure they do, and I'm sure you guys in England do. All right. So they didn't. Then you have Liverpool that didn't win either of the 2 big ones, right? Let's call them the big trophies. UCL, or the Champions League, or the league. They didn't win either of them. Then you have Real Madrid that won the Champions League and also won their league. So they did a domestic double, essentially. I mean, they did a double, not a domestic double, sorry, because they didn't win the Copa del Rey. So they won their league, but not only did they win the league, they won the Champions League. They won the Champions League, the biggest tournament in all the land. They won it, right? So how in the hell do they come into third, right? And I ain't even talk about the kicker yet. The kicker of this whole decision, is Manchester City, the one who won the club of the season, won the Premier League, but didn't win the Champions League. No, they got eliminated from the Champions League in the semifinals. And who beat them? Real Madrid, the third place team, the third best team in the world, according to your criteria. Liverpool didn't get second, got second in the Premier League and got second in the Champions League. So how did they get second? How are they the second best team in the world if the third place team eliminated them from the Champions League and the first place team eliminated them for competition, or essentially beat them in the Premier League? So by that logic, shouldn't Manchester City and Real Madrid be 1 and 2 then? And then it shouldn't go down to like, well, head to head, listen, guys, we beat you. We beat you, you know? So that's where the criteria is wrong. So here we go. Let's make it about a race, guys. If I'm in third place, and let's say I'm running against you guys and I'm in third place, and one of you's in second and one of you's in first, and I pass the person in second, and then I pass the person in first, what position am I in now? Am I still in third? Or am I in first place? The answer is I'm in first place because I beat the two people in front of me. I ran faster and worked harder than the two people in front of me. I beat the second place guy, and I beat the first place guy, who now, obviously, by obvious reasons, by obvious deduction, are no longer first and second, because I am now the first place person. The person who was in first now falls to second. The person who was in second now falls to third. That's how it works. That's how competition works, ladies and gentlemen. France football, that's how it works. So if my team beats the team, if my team beats the team that is the second best, the first best team in the world and the second best team in the world, isn't it by logical deduction the third place team is now the first place team? Come on, man. And that's a lot of words to explain something really stupid. I just spent like 5 minutes doing that. Or 10. I don't know how much I spent doing that explanation. But it's ridiculous. I don't understand these things. These are just like popularity contests for a bunch of journalists that write about the game, and that's all they want to talk. All they want to do is that. All they want to do is their way of showing the world, or some sort of power, or having some sort of power in this world, is to essentially decide who the winner is, or who the best player in the world is, and who the best club in the world is, all based on feeling. All based on, I just like this guy better. I like these guys better. Screw Real Madrid, because I've never liked them, which we know there are people out there that hate Real Madrid, and they hate Real Madrid simply why? Because maybe Real Madrid is the team that always wins everything. I get it. People hate perpetual winners. We are people who, the world is full of people who like to tear people down that are successful. If you got money, you cheated your way to it. If you got the girl, I don't know, man. Fuck you for being good looking. I don't know. That's just the way the world is, man. We don't like people to be successful. We got to shit on it, So Real Madrid is like the guy who gets the girl and who's who has the nice car and has a good job and does well, and then I guess they're gonna say you're gonna have Mr. Satan or whoever these other pundits, these other YouTubers are talking about how they, they're always robbing everybody. Like Barcelona has never, like a call has never gone in Barcelona's favor. Like a call has never gone in the favor of Manchester City. The call has never gone in the favor of Liverpool. A call has never gone in favor of the team that you hate the most. And then when it happens, it's a robbery. Oh, we got robbed. And you know what? That is one thing that I pride myself on, is that essentially I don't care about that type of shit. It bothers me when that happens. 100% it bothers me when that happens. When like a legitimate goal or a legitimate penalty or some, BS penalty is given, or a legitimate goal is disallowed, or a handball inside the box is given when it wasn't a handball, those kind of injustices. But bad calls happen in every sport. Even with, in basketball, watch basketball. Even in basketball, there are horrible calls made by the refs, even after video review. In football, American football, there are bad calls made by the refs, and they got like 900 of these guys on the field. And then they get in their little powwows with their little prison outfits, right? And they're like sitting there, and then they're looking at each other, and they're like, "Did you see it? I don't know. I saw this guy. He stepped out of bounds. I don't know if he stepped out of bounds. Kind of looked like he did. He had a half his shoe out. Do we consider half a shoe out of bounds?" So they get together. They powwow for a little bit. The cameras are all focused on him, and then that guy comes out with a loudspeaker or whatever because it connects to the to the intercom over in the stadium, and right player 52 was out of bounds. Call on the field stands. It's out of bounds. Play repeats from the third down. And that's whatever the fuck they say, right? It happens all the time, man. Why do people whine about it? I never like whining about referee decisions. Because at the end of the day, I think, if you're a team, let's say if you put 5 past your opponent, then the ref's not going to say anything, right? Even if the ref screwed you out of like a legit goal or something, well, instead of 6, you scored 5. And if he screwed you and gave the other team a non-existent BS penalty, well, then you lost. Then you won the game, and it's 5-1. So really, I don't like to argue a lot about refs. Obviously you're going to have close games that's going to come down to fine margins, and fine margins sometimes are determined by calls, and sometimes those calls are shitty. Sometimes those calls are garbage, man. Sometimes those things, and they make you angry. But at the end of the day, the whole system is run by people. I think the only one that actually works is goal line technology, because it either says the ball is in or it doesn't. And I think that works. But with offside, it's difficult to determine. With the handball, the offside is super difficult to determine because it's like down to like a millisecond and down to like centimeters. And if we were really to look, I understand VAR, but it's like if they were really to look at every like a single little millimeter, it's going to cause a huge issue, because you would be sitting there. VAR would have to be like going out on the field and measuring, and then looking at like 3D models and trying to figure out who was ahead by a millimeter, and you kill the game. So essentially that's the reason why there's always going to be some sort of human element to it. And that human error is going to keep us coming back, because we're going to get angry and say the game was robbed, and that's the entertainment. So we're going to get back at them the next time. And I think that's all part of the allure, the entertainment. So I don't like arguing about referees' decision. Never have, never will, I will, like that Sevilla handball, I think it was one time that cost us the league. What am I fixing my hat here? Anyway, all right, guys. So that's about it for this edition of the Y Nada Más podcast. I think it's just congratulations to Karim Benzema. What a fantastic season this dude had. Absolutely amazing season that he had. He hasn't had a great season so far. But he's coming back from injury. He's coming back from injury. He's trying to get his way back in there. So, I'm going to be patient with him. I love the guy to death. Like I said on my Twitter, I think the 3 events that might make me cry when it comes to football are, I almost cried when Casemiro left. I don't know. I really liked Casemiro, but, Tchouaméni is definitely not making us miss him that much. Obviously, I was sad when Cristiano left. But like for me, Modric, man, Modric retiring is going to kill me. I think Benzema retiring is really going to kill me too. Cristiano retiring as well, even though he doesn't play with us. But Benzema, man, seeing him, win that today, just it made me emotional because it's more of like, it's not like a Messi, it's not like a Ronaldo that these guys are just absolute perfection every time they play. He's a guy who's really had to work hard for a lot of times, living in the shadow of Cristiano. Sometimes when he was at Real Madrid, or most of the time when Cristiano was at Real Madrid, but he's such a team player and always gives up so much for the team that finally now that Cristiano wasn't around, it was his time to shine. So that was a beautiful thing to see. And I'm really happy. So I'm really happy for him. I'm really happy. And I think Real Madrid is in such a quality moment. Now, I was going to get into the whole Mbappé thing because that was another thing that happened since the last time we did but Mbappé is old news, man. It's old news. It's not going to happen. Maybe he'll come, maybe he won't, but whatever, man. That guy's old news. I think Vinicius, Rodrigo, Benzema, what we have right now, the core of the team, just the chemistry, those intangibles that I talk about, essentially, that you can't be measured, is this team is a unit. This team loves playing with each other. These guys love playing with each other. And that chemistry is what takes them above and beyond and gives them the chances and gives them the ability to pull, like I said, pull victory out of the jaws of defeat. When everybody thinks they're going to lose, everybody thinks that they're done for, they go and step it up a level. And why? Because they all believe in each other. The chemistry is something that you can't fuck with. And so Mbappé, with the way he's been behaving, unfortunately, which I used to love the kid, but definitely whatever happened this past year, or it might have always been part of him, but it ruined him. It ruined him. And essentially now no one's going to trust the guy. And he's not going to be able to come into Real Madrid and not somehow ruin the dynamic. And nobody wants to ruin the dynamic right now. So that's my opinion on that thing. But anyway, guys, that is what I got for you here on the podcast. Remember, you can listen to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the iHeartRadio app if you're in the United States, TuneIn, and Google Podcasts. You can also watch the video version if you're watching me right now. You can watch the video version on youtube.com/Inadamas podcast. Just look us up at Inadamas podcast on YouTube and you'll find me there. So it's been a while since I posted. I'm going to continue posting, guys. That's my goal, is to continue and to also our goal is to also make better content. We want to continue growing the content, bring on some cool people, what we can do there. And I think we're really going to hit it out of the park. So with that said, also, yes, follow on YouTube. Check us out on the website, inadamas.net. You can see you can watch you can listen to our podcast there. You can also check out the articles that have been written by my good friend Trombach, doing a great job writing articles for us. Also writing articles, I think, for Inter Milan, writing articles for Manchester United. I don't know the exact publications that he's working for. Sorry about that. But that's it. There's a lot of good stuff going on, and we're going to continue working on this. A la Madrid, a la Madrid, a la Madrid. What a season. It's going to continue being amazing. Then we have this, whole very awkward stop in the middle of the season because all of a sudden there's going to be this big tournament in Qatar. I think it's called the World Cup. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it before, but that's going to put a kibosh on the season for a little bit. But then we come back. And I think Real Madrid is doing great. Let's hope there's not a crazy dip in form and a lot of injuries. Barcelona's in the mud. Let's hope they stay in the mud. And that's it, guys. A la Madrid. Thank you for listening. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and wherever you listen to it. Subscribe on YouTube. And thank you very much for listening. Talk to you again soon.